and welcome to the Lattes and Lingerie podcast. My name is Ella Pierce, and today we are going to talk a little bit and jump on the bandwagon of the whole new year, new me planning bandwagon. So today I have 7 tips for you to use to get ready for the new year and shred it completely, no matter where you are in your life. This podcast does come with a worksheet that you can download so that you can go ahead and do all of it in your own journal or your notes app or on a scrap piece of paper if you want, whatever it is that works best for you. I do recommend that you keep it in a place that you can refer to next year because I could not tell you how valuable it was to be able to look back on everything that I did last year as far as preparation, planning, goal setting, resolution, choosing, etc. And I highly recommend doing that, and I will definitely continue to do that for myself going forward. If you would like to download that worksheet, just go onto the description box if you're watching on YouTube or the show notes for whatever, for wherever it is that you're listening, and you can follow along in your own journal that way. Or just pause and do it in real time. That's totally fine too. Just do whatever it is that works for you. You're the boss. I bought my first one in November of 2019, and I finally figured out that all the time before November of 2019, I was doing it wrong for me. So, of course, I'm not telling you, however you journal that works for you. If you continue to do it and you get value out of it, that's what works for you, and that's great. But what I was doing was misunderstanding what a journal was as opposed to a diary. And so I kept, it basically became this thing that I was just venting into, but then would definitely never want to read it again because it was all basically negative. But regardless, I don't want to look back on these things and feel like shit about it. And so what's the point of even doing it in the first place, especially if it's not really helping me grow or learn or whatever. And so now that I understand how to journal that is effective for me, which basically just becomes a place for me to put my thoughts and my reflections instead of events that happen or things that happen with individuals in my life. Now I actually get a lot of value out of it. But getting ready for a new year isn't just about journaling, and it isn't just about deep cleaning your house. And of course there are aspects of those that are valuable, but that's not all it is. So what I've done is I've actually spent hours and hours watching and participating in the exercises that a lot of creators have put out, and some of them are similar, some of them are different, some of them are to accomplish different goals, and they all are valuable in their own way. But what I've done is taken them all, figured out what was valuable, kind of compiled a big monster mash list of all of these, and I think that this is a really great way to not only say, where is my mindset, what goals should I be setting that actually work for me, that are things I care about, not just arbitrary things I feel like I should be doing, as well as what do I want to do, what do I want to be, what do I want to have, etc., etc. So I also want to take this opportunity to let you know that if you haven't checked out the podcast from last week, I post every week on Mondays, then go check out the Clean Slate Ritual. It is not too late, even though you missed the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the 0 degree of Aquarius, which was a historical moment. It's not too late. It's never too late to set intentions. You know, what's that quote where it's the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today? That's very much true for all intention setting. So I don't care if you're seeing this in June, if you see it, at the end of January or whatever, there's always great times to set intentions, and it's not too late. So go check that out and do the ritual. It would be a really awesome way for you to do that before you start on this, so you can have a really clear mind about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and you can let all of the bullshit go down the drain. So I highly recommend that you take a look at that. I just want to give a shout out to all the creators because these are not mine, and I received extremely amazing results from many of them, and every single one of them that I included here was important, and so I want to shout them out and give you access to the same ones, and they'll of course be linked as well. So first I want to talk about Kalyn Nicholson. She is the best friend that doesn't know I exist. I I love her so much. I don't know where I would be without her. It's not an exaggeration to say that she's changing my life every week that she posts. But she focuses mostly on spirit and mindset in journaling. And that's not to say, like, Kalyn is the queen of the gist, which stands for getting your shit together. That's not to say that Kalyn doesn't value or isn't a proponent of putting your space together, and like especially physically. But what I really gained from Kalyn's Coffee Talk podcast are her ability to help you use journaling as a way to figure out what you're doing and why you're doing it and what you should do. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the actual podcast from 2019 getting ready for 2020, but she does have a ton. One of the other things that I want to point out is that for me in 2019 there was no amount of journaling or cleaning my house or there was literally nothing that could have changed the way that my 2019 went, and it was really, really difficult. And as soon as the energies shifted, like for example, as soon as Saturn gave me a break when Jupiter entered this year, I think Jupiter really helped having Jupiter in my first house with Saturn. Even though it was difficult collectively, it was much better for me in the first house. And so once that kind of those energies balanced of the restriction and the expansion, I was able to kind of have like a big weight lifted off my chest and my mind. But also as my like year 9, numerologically, I was in the personal year 9 in 2019. As soon as the year 9 like fucked off and the year 1 energy came in, I was able to do a lot more this year in 2020 as far as figuring out where I was going. And if you are in a place where you just continuously don't do the things that you say you want to do, and you're your own worst enemy in that way, where like maybe you're procrastinating a lot, like you might just not, that just might be what you need. And there's no sense in getting upset that the goals that you had aren't completed or that they're taking you longer than you expected. So I just want to put that out there. No amount of journaling or cleaning my house or, feeling guilty about anything was going to change the way that went. But I'm really thankful for the ability to journal through those feelings and recognize that I wasn't just going crazy. It was just the way that it had to be for that time. Another person who I want to reference here is Christina Lopes. She's the Heart Alchemist on Instagram. If you have Instagram, you should totally check her out. She also has it's very similar, she wants you to take stock of the year and do this and do that and, things that we'll talk about. But hers is actually more of a ritualistic way. So she has a video called What to Do Before 2021, I think it's called. Of course, it'll be linked. But she talks about making this more of a ritual and less of just you sitting down with a coffee and doing journaling. And so she talks about, things like shamanic drumming or dancing or whatever. And so I highly recommend that you check that out to see if maybe that works for you the best too. She says it helps program the intentions into your body. So I highly recommend that you figure out how that works best for you. For me, I like to listen to like thunderstorms, but other people love the physical aspect of her ritual, so highly recommend that. But of course she also had some of the very similar advice as far as like taking stock, etc., that we'll talk about. Kelly Dawn is amazing. She is the one who I want to shout out the most as far as like what helped me last year, because besides Kalyn was very much about the mindset and the feelings, but Kelly gave me permission to want things. And so she asked, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? And we're going to talk about that and how to figure those things out in the podcast. But she added a humanitarian aspect to it that acknowledged that as a human, we want things. And so hers is very much a tangible direction setter, which is really valuable. Another person who was very instrumental in creating this list is Muchelle B. If you've never found Muchelle B on YouTube before, you should totally check her out. She's a really cute little Australian accent and she's a little bit more oriented towards the getting shit done, which is, resetting your life, deep cleaning your house, simplifying, decluttering, minimalism, etc. So if you need to do a physical exercise like decluttering or deep cleaning or doing a life admin day, which we'll talk about later, then she's a very valuable resource and filled with inspiration for getting things like that done. Then there are a couple techniques that I just want to bring attention to right away, which is the Simplify Your Life Challenge, which was on Muchelle B's channel. Recommend that. We'll talk more about that later. The trigger list. Wow, that is something that we're going to talk about in a minute. That's like the first thing we're going to talk about. The 10 areas of life, which is very valuable technique, as well as tarot and using tarot as a journaling prompt. And so we're going to talk more about all of that as well. So that's kind of where this podcast is coming from. Thank you very much for sitting through this part, because I want to give credit to all the people who made this possible, because I am just somebody who's benefiting from them, but I want to put them all together in order to help other people. Maybe instead of having to watch all of the videos to find the gems that really helped me, I can put them all together, but still I want to credit these individual creators, because what they do is amazing, and all of the techniques that I've gained from these people are all free. And by sharing with you the fact that they exist, that hopefully will bring some more attention to them, and they can get some benefits from me, because I've benefited so much from them. Okay, are you guys ready? So before we get started with the 7 tips, there is a tip 0. So tip 0 is to use a trigger list. So I'll show you, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll show you what my trigger list looks like. I actually got a notebook just for making a trigger list, because I don't want to fill up a bullet journal or my actual journal with all this. But so this is what a trigger list looks like. It literally is just a bunch of things that are kind of plaguing my mind. And so it goes through and asks you, like, what are the projects you've started? What are the projects that need to be started? What are people expecting of you? What commitments do you have? Who needs to be called? You know, what packages are you waiting on? Are there packages that you need to purchase? What is it that you're saving up for? What is it that needs to be done this, what needs to be taken out of your mind and put onto paper so it's not plaguing you anymore. And if you don't do this before you start all of the other parts of this process, you're going to get hung up on little tiny details, like, the fact that, like, for me, I have to paint my closet, because in the bus we're making a lot of progress on building it, but I have to paint that, and even though I'm halfway done with it, we've started doing other things. So it's not like I didn't put everything I need to do on the bus on here, but that is something that's not getting done that could be done, and so I put that in there. So that is what the trigger list is, and you can check out more information about that in the box below. I just want to bring attention to Christina Lopes' ritual. I'm not going to go into what the ritual is. I think you should watch her video, because she describes it really well. But aside from the actual ritual portion, one of the things that she talks about that I think is completely invaluable and cannot be discounted is she brings attention to the value of making a decision. And unfortunately, I don't recall the source of this, but I was listening to a podcast. My guess is that it was with Jacob Sokol, and WTF Am I Doing With My Life, I think is what it's called. But somehow, somewhere, he interviewed someone, and they were talking about the ability to make a decision as a commitment. And so if you make this your decision and you do not look back as to what you could have done instead, then it will continue to be the only option, and you will continue to make that work because you've made the decision. As a human being, we're the only animals that can really practice discernment, and having made a decision is paramount to your success. You will never succeed if you're waffling back and forth. You need to make decisions. You need to be decisive. So basically every single person that I watched at some point in their video told you that you need to take stock of your year. And I put in some of my own variations of this prompt. And so basically what I'm going to do is read the questions to you that you should consider and answer. And it's okay if they're short. It's okay if they're long. But you should answer every single one. And then I'm not going to answer every single one for you, but I will give you some examples of things that I think are helpful, or at least kind of how I came to some of these answers myself. So what you need to do is take stock of your life through the last year. Now we're reflecting, we are just acknowledging, we're not judging. It's okay to acknowledge that something was challenging or incredible, but right now you're just acknowledging that they happened. And so the first question is, what was significant? So answer, what was significant about your life this year? Now that it's December of the year, what was significant? Specifically, what was challenging? Answer, what was challenging about this year? Do not feel guilty if what was challenging for others was not challenging for you. And also, don't feel like shit if what was challenging for you was easy for others. Next, list what were the major accomplishments for your year. After that, what were the major shortcomings? Answer, who were the major characters in your life? And then ask yourself, were they positive influences or negative influences? Be honest. What of your goals from last year went well? Why? And what of your goals from last year didn't go well? And why? Don't skip the why. After you've done that, ask yourself, what do these whys teach you? What are you grateful for specifically in this year? So for me, like I said, I'm not going to answer every single one. I'm not going to tell you about the characters in my life because you don't know them. Aside from this character, Hades, who's probably snoring throughout the whole video. So if he is, sorry, I can't do anything about him. He's just napping on the couch. So besides that character, you guys don't know any of them. So I'm just going to skip that question. But for example, some of the highlights are that we bought the bus and we started building it, which is something that we've been waiting for 3 years. We decided this in December of 2017 that we were going to buy a vehicle and build it into a house and live in it. And finally, my stepdaughter is almost 18, and so we are finally building it. We are finally on that road to success in that goal. Some of the things that were significant in my life were the amount that I got into astrology and tarot. Now, you guys have known that I've been a dabbler for about 10 years, but it became extremely important to me this year, and so that's something that was very significant. Other things that were significant in 2020 for me were the reading of Frances Scovel Shinn's, why do I always say that? Florence. Her name is Florence. Florence Scovel Shinn's book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And just generally the fact that the law of attraction became something that was more front and center in my life. In 2019, I originally heard about this concept from Zoe Ariel, as well as Jen Sincero's book, You Are a Badass. So if you've never looked into any of the law of attraction, it's hippy-dippy. It's fucking hippy-dippy, and you know what? I'm cool with it. So if that's not your cup of tea, it's fine, move on. But if you've never heard of it, maybe look into it. Also, something career-wise that happened in 2020 that's notable and significant is that I rebranded Cherry Tree. With the help of a good friend, I basically halved my prices because I had a lot of lies and stories built into the pricing and why it needed to be what it was. And also the way that I'm trying to help people and the motivation and the motive that I have for empowering people, because there was a lot of stories built in about how I was invaluable, and so how can I empower people when I'm disempowered? So that's another story for another time, but I wanted to make the purpose a lot less convoluted and make it accessible to more people, which is what I've done. I also learned how to use my Venus returns. I know I've referenced this in like every single video and podcast since I've started, but I promise that there will, more in the spring, there will be a video about Venus returns or using returns or conjunctions in a constructive way. But I was able to quit 3 separate addictions because of the Venus retrograde that happened in early 2020, and that was very extreme, extremely significant. As far as gratitude, I am specifically gratuitous. I'm specifically grateful for the way that we received the bus, and that's another story for another time. I'm sorry I keep referencing things I'm going to talk about in the future, but it's a really cool story that deserves its own podcast and video. But the way that we received it was really amazing. I'm so grateful for that. I'm really grateful for my mom. She's helped me a ton over my entire life. I'm nearly 30, and I don't know how people go through their lives without their mothers. I'm so thankful for her. A few YouTubers who have really opened my eyes. Most of them are listed in here as far as, who's really helped me figure things out. Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, I'm really very grateful for that because it made me, I have a Scorpio moon, so I'm extremely suspicious, and I also have the ability to be kind of narcissistic because I can't blame this on any sign particular or placement, but I have my own expectations of where this comes from, and so I'm working through that. But his book brings up the topic of suspicion, and if you're suspicious, you will recognize that eventually you must recognize that someone who is suspicious will never be proven wrong. They will only ever assume that they haven't been proven right yet. And me reading that and realizing that no matter what I do, I can never know anything. So what's the point of being suspicious? I just have to trust. I have to really embrace trust. And I learned that from him in January of 2020 through that book. And it's not an exaggeration to say that has changed my life. The goals that went well for me were I quit smoking. I started a podcast. I'm witching a lot more now, which is really cool. One thing that's a story for another time, again, is the difference between the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator ENTP and ENFP. I did a lot more T than F this year, which is really making me feel a lot more confident and comfortable in my own mind. I started a content-based business. Hello, here you are. My astrology and tarot practice has really benefited. Meditation has become more important. I haven't started vlogging, but I got a camera that's suitable for it, which is really a great goal taken care of. And I got a laptop, which I was using a 21-inch iMac, which was beautiful and really great, but not very functional for what I was wanting to do, which is live at a bus and travel to do photography. And so that wasn't that useful. So I got my laptop. Goals that didn't go well is I haven't vlogged, but honestly, nobody's interested in following around a nobody, and so since I'm still a nobody, there's no reason to have to worry about that. Yet, I put debt-free, which is hilarious. Like, I'm $57,000 in debt. I'm not shy about that. A lot of it is student loans. So why the hell did I think I was going to be debt-free in a year? And even if 2020 went really well, I think having $57,000 worth of debt completely paid off was a hilarious goal. I don't even know why I put that down. Being vegan did not happen. I think arbitrarily I could be a better pet mom, so I don't think I was the best pet mom. I didn't practice any yoga at all, but that's okay. I didn't really write or publish anything. That's also okay. I did write a bunch of blog posts for Cherry Tree, which is great, so I kind of made that, but that wasn't really what the goal was about. I didn't get any tattoos. I wanted to get 5, but this was not a year for tattoos, so that's okay. I don't have any merch for sale on my store, but I, of course, am still a photographer, so I still sell things, so that's okay too. Basically, as far as what I learned about all of this was that I learned a lot about cycles, astrocycles specifically, and very much Venus's cycle through my chart. And I also learned that it's all just a game. Like, time blocking and scheduling isn't for me. Using my intuition and going with the flow is for me. I also learned that the Taurus in me does need a break. And even though the Aries in me and the Capricorn in me really fucking hates that, it's the way that it has to be. I will literally work 16 hours in one day for almost no reason just to have to take off 3 days in a row, even though I could have just worked all 4 days and done like a 6 to 8 hour day, had a lot more time put in and not felt so burnt out. Like, I'm I don't have to feel bad that I get burnt out easily. I just have to not burn myself out. And that's what I learned this year. So step 2 is we want to talk about the quality and the direction that you're trying to go in the new year. And so there's a few ways that you can do that. So the first question of step 2 is to ask, where is the astrological transits going to be coloring your life? So where is Saturn and Jupiter in this part of your life going to be in your chart? Check that, because they're encouraging you to learn specific lessons. So that's not something to ignore. That's something to build into your plan. Next, ask, what is the numerology personal year that you're going to be utilizing in this next year coming up? You also need to check in and or define, if you've never done this before, your personal values as well as your personal principles. Kalyn brought this up in a podcast, but it comes from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think it's called, by Stephen Covey. I've never read it. It's on my list, but I haven't made it through that one yet. But basically what I've kind of figured out is that the values are your beliefs and the laws are kind of your principles are kind of your laws. So we'll talk about that. I'll give you some examples of that when I go through my examples. The next thing is, what is your purpose and how does that align with what it is that you're manifesting actively, but also trying to manifest in the new year? So let's talk about some examples with that. So for me, Saturn and Jupiter is in my second house, which means that finances, budgeting, defining values, and working hard to make all of that a reality, that is the lesson that Saturn and Jupiter are trying to teach me. So for me to just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to focus on my finances or my budget this year. I'm just going to worry about feeling good and whatever. I'm not going to be able to do that, because Saturn and Jupiter are going to make my finances be a part of my life front and center. So where is it that it's happening for you in your chart? Do you have it in your 7th house of relationships? Are your relationships going to be where you're learning a lot of lessons? Is it in your health sector? Are you going to be having to focus on your health? So you really should look and see what are the lessons that the universe is trying to make you learn, and actually try to learn them instead of trying to be drug kicking and screaming down the road. So for numerology, my personal year is 2, which in comparison to 2020, this is a slow moving energy. So I need to be conscientious that if there is a shift from last, year of excitement and energy to one of less energy and more kind of wading through the sand and focusing on my relationships and putting more attention to those, that doesn't mean that I'm not doing well. It just means that if I'm feeling some dissonance, then I didn't acknowledge that was going to be the case when I set my goals. So what I need to do is focus on honing my message in order to receive the tribe who is supposed to be around me, as well as make sure that my one-on-one relationships are going in a positive direction and that I'm managing the expectations that I have for people in my life. Basically what I'm trying to say is, if you know what the cosmic professors are trying to teach you, then you can learn the proper lessons and not feel like you are being drugged down the street kicking and screaming. So as far as checking in with your values and principles, I'll just tell you what mine are so that way you can kind of have an idea. The values that I have are, I value is the way that you can write the sentence. I value authenticity, confidence, resolve, intensity and passion, and determination. Those are not laws in my life. It's not a law for me to be confident. It's not a law for me to be intense or passionate. It's not a law for me to be determined. Those are just what I value and what I think is valuable. The laws in my life are honesty. It is a law for me to be honest, because I hate when people aren't honest with me. It is a law for me to be loyal. And it needs to be a law for me to be receptive and not think I'm right all the time. It needs to be a law for me to be aware of myself and my ego. So that's kind of what I've done. Don't feel like you have to do it the same way. If these words mean something else to you and this gives you something valuable, then totally do it however you want. Then for my purpose and how does that align with what I'm manifesting, I kind of alluded to this earlier when I talked about cherry trees prices and the way that I had things built in. What I wrote is, my purpose is to empower, guide, enchant, and excite. And I'm here to learn to accept the individual I really am and teach others. And how does that align with what I'm manifesting? So I said, I've been really becoming aware of what I'm manifesting over all of 2020, and I'm starting to be exemplary of what I intended to do. I couldn't empower people from a disempowered state that I was in, and over 2020, I actually became aware of that. I wanted to believe I was healed of all my wounds and traumas, but I was wrong. In 2019, I realized I was wrong, and in 2020, I was given the awareness and tools to mend the wounds. From here on out, I will be more capable than ever before to lead people to a place of empowerment and excitement. So, take that for what you will and try to write your own. After you've done that, it's time to finally look forward. Now, this is where it gets kind of exciting. I know sometimes reflecting can be kind of a drag, but it is paramount that you do all of that before you move forward and look forward. A few questions that you should ask yourself are, what word would you choose to represent the upcoming year? So many people choose words now instead of resolutions. If you want to choose discipline, maybe if you're really focusing on your health, your diet, or your work, then discipline could be a great word. Or abundance. You could have abundance in your relationships, abundance in your bank account, abundance in the time that you're spending with your family, etc. But what you should do is use your word in a sentence a few times, because that will actually create mantras. And I don't really care if you don't like mantras. I don't really care if you use them. I still recommend that you put them into a sentence so that way you can see them in action, even if you never use them later. What are you no longer available for? So I'll give you some examples later, but ask yourself, what are you no longer available for? Are you no longer available for smoking cigarettes? Are you no longer available for binge drinking until you black out? Are you no longer available for people making you feel obligated to take part in things? Are you no longer available for your parents' toxicity in, your relationships? Are you no longer available for, your siblings making you feel obligated to, babysit their kids? Or I don't know what it is for you, but what are you no longer available for? What isn't working and what contradicts the word of the year? Right? What is not working in your life? You don't have to change it this year, but becoming aware of it is the first step to stop contradicting what you say you want. And finally, what do you want to do differently this year? So for me, my word of the year is resolute. And there's a difference between resolute and determined or disciplined. And I want resolute because I want to be unwavering, and acknowledging that being disciplined isn't always a positive thing is something that I needed to learn over 2020. So my sentences are, I'm resolute in loyalty, I'm resolute in my budget, I am resolute in dedication to my health, physical and mental, and I'm resolute to my plans and goals. That does not anywhere in there say I am resolute to my routines or resolute to my schedule, which is something that I overly romanticized in 2020. I am no longer available for my festering resentment. I have a lot of that, which I'm still working on. Shit sleep schedules, or procrastination, or doing it later, which I've learned is not really a thing. Later never exists. Every time that you do something, it's now. It's not ever later. I'm not available for binging, food, TV, or social media. My highly processed diet, or being shy, little activity, and not seeing the sunlight. These are all contradicting my goals and my word of resolute. So I need to be acknowledging that they are contradicting and move on from that. So step number 4 is brainstorming. Now, right now, you're not committing to anything. You're just considering what it is that you may want to do in the future. It might not happen this year, but you're just considering what it is that might work for you in the future. How to brainstorm. Now, these are some really fun activities, and you don't have to do all of them, but here are some options. And these are all I did these are all items that I used in my process of trying to figure out what I was trying to do for the new year. So take it or leave it. Whatever works best for you is awesome. Just brainstorm kind of how you're feeling about different aspects of your life. One of my favorite ways to do this was to do a tarot spread of the astrological houses. Now, if you're not familiar, I'll put a link to the video of how the concepts of astrology work, but I'll also include a link to Marin Altman's video about the houses if you want to watch that, houses and astrology. You can also just Google astrology houses and go to images, and you'll find a pie chart that shows you what all the houses are. So this will just force you to use your mind in a creative way that will influence you to look at the aspects of your life with more of a critical eye instead of just being like, nope, everything's great there, or nope, everything's horrible there. I use a 13 card spread, which basically meant like the first card I drew was the first house, the second house was the second card, and so on and so forth. And then I drew a 13th card to put in the middle, which was kind of an overall or overarching theme of the way that my life was going. Here's a pro tip. Don't forget that you should customize this. If that doesn't make sense for you, then don't do that. Like, for example, I had 2 people in my life who really were representative of the 7th house. And so I did 2 cards, so I ended up with a 14 card spread. One of them was for my husband, one of them was for my best friend. Some interesting things that showed up for my astrological chart spread were the 3rd house, which is about communication, intellect, etc., which for me is Aries, as well as Mercury is there in its home house, which is a very important aspect of my life, apparently. Was the Strength card. The keywords for the Strength card are confidence, self-assuredness, patience, assertiveness, the ability to overcome problems through willpower, and having faith in yourself. Over the last 7 years, I have been overcoming this conditioning to be concerned about the way that I communicate with people. I remember the first time that someone shamed me for the way that I communicated. And it was at the time, it was one of my best friend's older sister who I was probably yelling about something because I like to yell, but I was probably just passionately exclaiming my opinions about something. And I remember her saying to simmer down. And I remember getting so upset with her about it because I wasn't even talking to her. Initiated the conditioning that I should be self-conscious of whatever it is that I'm talking about and how I'm talking about it. I also could never forget my first serious boyfriend that I had. We were together for 3 years from the time I was 14 to 17, which are, of course, like monumental years in the development of any human being. And he was constantly telling me that I was too loud and nobody cared about what I was saying, so I should just like be quiet. And I really internalized that, and there were more examples over and over of my life where people were like, you're just too intense, and I really internalized that. And so it was really interesting to have the Strength card, which talks about, becoming aware and accepting of the shadow self, coming up in the 3rd house of communication and intellect. So the card's advice was to be confident and accept myself, which is something that I've been really working on over the last year. Another tarot spread that you can use is the Celtic Cross. This one doesn't have quite as many aspects. It doesn't have aspects of your life that you can investigate, but it does have a very comprehensive overview of whatever it is that the question is. So if you do a Celtic Cross with your next year in mind, then that's what it will be. So like, for example, the first card is the heart of the matter, and then the next card is what crosses you, and then it's like what's behind you and what's before you and what's below you, which is like your subconscious opinions about it, and what's above you, which is like your conscious opinions of it. And then it's, and then it talks about like you as the question asker, and then your environment and your hopes and dreams, and then the outcome. And so that can be a really great way for you to, ask yourself, how am I feeling about everything? What am I finally completed with, and what am I going to be coming up upon next? When I did my Celtic Cross for the Great Conjunction, the past position had the 2 of Swords, which is something that is so funny because for a while there, I got it like every single way possible. I got it in both the decks that I use. I got it in an app, in a daily app, multiple times in like a 2 or 3 week period. I also got it in a pick a card from Stargirl. Like literally every single way that I could possibly get this card, I got it after like a 2-week period. And I started to ask myself, like, who is this person inside of me that is stopping me? Who's this stalemate energy coming from? And why do I have this feeling that whatever I'm doing is not the right thing, so I'm just not doing anything? Who's the unseen enemy inside of me is basically what this card was asking me. And to see it in the past was like, I just got goosebumps thinking about it. Like, having it in the past is a huge weight off my shoulders. And regardless of whether or not I continue to act as my own unseen enemy in the future, is acknowledging the fact that it's a problem that's being solved and it's not an unseen problem any longer. And if you are not interested in doing any tarot readings or don't have a tarot deck or whatever, that's totally fine. Another really great way to kind of investigate what it is that you should be looking at in your life, as far as like, where should your energy go? What are the things that you should be doing? What are the types of goals that you might want to set? What are the resolutions you might be interested in? What are your priorities? Is to check out the 10 areas of life. So I'll leave a link to that below, but I'm just also going to list them here. So the 10 aspects of life are family and friends, personal development, spirituality, finances, career, romance, fun, giving, environment, and health, in no particular order. So this isn't necessarily just for the next year. This is kind of like an overarching theme. Like, what is it that I think is valuable over the next lifetime? And some things that I wrote down specifically for like personal development was to read 1 book per month. I want to start doing some 30-day challenges. I think that would be really fun. One of them that I want to do is like, I wear lingerie every day for 30 days. I think that would be cool. But Matt D'Avella does some 30-day challenges. He has a series where he did 30-day challenges for like an entire year, and he said he learned a lot. So that's really cool. I also want to go to seminars and conferences, both for photography as well as astrology. So I think that would be super cool. Is to do Kelly Dawn's Be, Do, and Have exercise. I like to actually split it up into 4 different lists. 2 of them are the B category, which are, one is more abstract and one of them is more tangible. So I'll give examples for that. But then, what do you want to be abstractly and tangibly? What do you want to do, and what do you want to have? So for me, I put my abstract B's are, I want to be receptive and intuitive. I want to be patient. I want to be confident. I want to be self-aware. I want to be positive or optimistic, resolute, that's my word, as well as booked, which is sort of tangible, but also is sort of abstract. And I want to be abundant, obviously. Who doesn't? And then my tangible B's are, I want to be vegan, I want to be active, I want to be consistent on social media, be growing a network, which is also kind of more of a do, but that's okay. I want to be a podcaster, I want to continue doing this, I want to be a vlogger. In the future, I want people to care about what I'm doing with my business, and I want them to be able to see the behind the scenes. And so that's something that I want to be in the future. I want to be an astrologer, which I don't know if I'd ever do professionally, but to me, an astrologer is somebody who just uses astrology to live their life in the best way. And I also want to be a tarot reader, which is something valuable for me, but also could be valuable for people in the future. And I want to continue, working on the cycles, like witching, basically, like using tarot, using rituals, using, the cycles of the moon or whatever. So I want to continue to be those things, and or start being some of those things. Some things that I want to do is, like I said, growth on social. I want to complete our bus in the next year. I want to minimize the remainder of my house. I also want to go to an astro conference, yoga, meditate. I want to do, more dream analysis, which I've really been getting into, editorial photography and travel photography. So what is it that you want to do? I also want to have a YouTube paycheck, which would be totally killer, a store, a shoot concept, which this is totally not relevant to Cherry Tree, but any patrons would be awesome. Like 10 would be plus. I'm going to have a nice wardrobe, and I want to have the solar system for our bus. So now it's finally time for you to make some commitments. So what are your, and Kalyn and Muchelle B both talked about this. Your resolutions should not be number based, and they should be things that you completely have control over. So they're not goals, and they don't include numbers, and they don't include things that you can't control. Then next, what is your priorities? So your priorities are also not goals. They should never include numbers, and they should never be things that you can't control. Now, if you're having a hard time coming up with resolutions and priorities that are not goals or don't have numbers or are things that you can't actually control, then try to consider what it is that would make those things possible, and then see if you can make those actions your resolutions or priorities. So for example, instead of being like, I want to lose X amount of pounds, then, or kilos or wherever it is that you live, then you can instead say, I want to exercise X amount of times per week, or I want to include X cups of greens every day, or you can have a maximum for fast food or takeout per month. So instead of having the priority or the resolution be the thing that you don't really have control over, like, I don't care what anybody says, you don't really have control over whether you lose a pound this week or not. The only thing that you can do is resolve to have the actions associated with that go as positively as possible. And then what you should do is ask yourself, what are the habits that would support these kinds of resolutions and priorities? And so, as an example, my resolutions are to continue forgiving. I have to work on my mindset and story healing. I have a lot of stories around my value and my worth, as well as money and what money is like, how to get it, that it's difficult, or whatever. Also, doing it now and not doing it later, because later doesn't exist. And also creating a balance between structure and intuitive workflow. My priorities are consistency and online presence, dedicated to physical, mental, and financial health, because Saturn and Jupiter in my second house. So that has to be important. Being optimistic and not sarcastic or impatient, which is something that I need to work on. So the habits that support this, among other things, of course, but here's some good ones that are related to things that I said, are a good sleep schedule, any physical activity at all, planning, but not scheduling necessarily, batching, meal planning, following my budget, but also communicating the budget with Jay, utilizing my softwares better, and acknowledging that they're tools, not toys. Okay, so for number 6, this is the moment that you've been waiting for. Now you're finally setting goals. Like I said before, if you are not able to choose things that don't have numbers in them, like reaching a subscriber count or losing a certain amount of weight or whatever, then you might end up really disappointed, even though you did really great work. And so just be aware that those kinds of goals are not that useful. And so remember, it's okay to put those kind of goals on a vision board, but it's not okay for you to view yourself as a failure or a success based on these number goals that you don't really have control over. So now this is something that I've heard many times that you should do, but also have never done before. And so I'm really happy to report that I finally did it, and it was as valuable as they say. And so what you need to do is sit there and think, in 4 years, where do you want to be? People overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate what they can do in 10. And so ask yourself, where do you want to be in December of 2024, or, add forward to wherever it is that you're watching this at, whatever time frame. For me, that's December of 2024, or essentially by 2025. Where do you need to be in 2 years in order for that to take place? Where do you need to be in 1 year? And so what are those achievements for you? Then after you've done that, which I'll give you some examples so you can kind of see it in action, but before you complete, whatever it is that you need to take part in for this year, ask yourself if you have any goals that are irrelevant to the rest of your life or don't really have anything to do with the next 4 years. Like, for example, how many books do you want to read this year, or what books do you want to read? Or what educational courses do you want to take? Especially because, like, for me, I want to take astrology courses, but I don't necessarily want to be a professional astrologer. And so that's not super related to the rest of my life, but it is a goal that I want to have this year. Consider recreational skills. Like, for example, do you want to, be Maybe you want to join a basketball team this year or something like that. So those are some things that you can put in that are goals that aren't actually part of the next 4 years or whatever. So what habits would be helpful in impacting this itinerary of the next 4 years of your life? What would a seasonal at a glance look like for this next year? And what is the first step for everything on this list? When would be a reasonable time to start that thing? And remember that not everything needs to be started in January. Like, for example, I don't schedule my time anymore because Kalyn pointed out in one of her podcasts that you might not be the person who wants to regiment all of your time. Maybe you are the type who wants to like intuitively flow through, and so it's good for you to have kind of an idea of where you should be going, but having time blocking isn't for you. And I noticed that I was kind of the person that was like, I'm going to romanticize time blocking. Like, Amy Landino is amazing, but I'm not like her. Like, I'm not a type A personality. I'm lazy sometimes and need to relax more than, you know, somebody who has a real go-getter energy to them. And it was kind of like, well, I'm not eating kale for every meal, so I might as well just go do hard drugs and like black out all day. And of course that's not really what I was doing, but it was almost like, if I'm not going to be doing a perfectly regimented schedule, then I might as well not do anything on my goal list. And so I needed to stop doing that, and maybe that's something that you need to consider as well. So you're not creating a schedule, you're just getting kind of a season at a glance. So here are my examples. This is a little bit vulnerable to admit, but by January of 2025, which would be 4 years from now, I want to be at a healthy weight of 125 pounds. I'm only 5'2", I'm very short. 125 pounds is healthy weight for me. But currently I'm at like 220 pounds. I also want to have a 5-figure a month commission, which is how I pay myself through a Cherry Tree. 5-figure sub count. I want to publish a coffee table style book. At that time, I want to be scouting for land ownership. I want to have my own designs be selling better than my non-owned designs. I want to phase out selling other brands in the first place by 2030. So that's halfway to there. So by that time, my designs need to be doing at least half of my revenue for my store. My emergency fund should be long fully funded by that time. My retirement and investment accounts are well on their way to being valuable instead of just having been started. And my debt is completely gone. You divide that into 4 chunks. So that would mean a year before that, then I would need to be at 145 pounds. I would need to have 5,000 commissions, and then I would be working towards 5,000 subscribers. So that would be, 2,500 would be fine. You could do in 4, which would be like 3,500, but whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's just like a step towards it. 20 shoots planned or 10 completed and 5 commentaries written. I would want to have traveled through all 50 states at that point in order to decide about scouting for land. I would want to have 10 staple pieces or seasonal varieties in my store. I would have relationships being created with manufacturing companies, as well as an emergency fund that is well funded by now. And my debt would be down to $25,000, which is about half of what it was. And my retirement and investments are definitely started by this time. That means in 2022, I would be at 170 pounds. I would be at 2,000 for my commission per month. I would do 1,000 subs. I would hopefully have 1,000 subs at that time. I would have 10 shoots for my book planned, 5 of them completed, with at least 3 of them the commentary written. This time we would be learning bus life, because I imagine there's some things to learn to get comfortable with it. My store is fully integrated as a part of my revenue stream. Emergency fund is fully funded at this time, but my investments are not. I don't have any investments at this point, probably, and I'm still working on my debt, which at this point is hopefully at 50,000. And that means in 2021, with taking into account everything else that we've already talked about, that means that hopefully by the end I'll be at 195 pounds. I will have 1,400 in commissions, which is essentially what I want for like a comfortable budget for us now. 500 subs. So if you haven't subbed yet, it would be really awesome to have you here. I would have 5 shoots planned, as well as 2 completed and at least 1 of them, the full commentary written, as well as the bus completed. I would launch at my store, and follow a fucking budget. Other irrelevant goals that I have are to read all 12 books and to study all of Chris Brennan's Hellenistic astrology, which he uses for his course, but I'm not actually taking the course, I'm just reading the book, and finish the bus, which is sort of relevant, but like I'm not living bus life yet because she hasn't graduated, but we're going to be finishing the bus this year. So when you break that down into what the seasonal would be for the next year, then in the winter, which is the first part, I'm going to be, doing my 3 books. I'm going to be doing chapters 1 through 7 of Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan. I'm going to get the hang of all of this stuff that I'm trying to include in my life now. I'm going to schedule consistently on Instagram, and I'm going to check in mentally to make sure that all of these things that I'm trying to accomplish are making me feel good and not bad. So in the spring, or as I like to call it, the real new year, I, of course, will be doing 3 books. I'll do chapters 8 through 13 in Hellenistic Astrology. This is when I want to go hard with my actual health, because Mars is going to be conjuncting my Venus, and we'll talk more about all that later when we talk about conjunctions in astrology, using them in a beneficial way. But that's when that's going to be happening for me, and so that's what I want to be focusing on then. I want to add a second weekly video to YouTube, and at that point I want to be more active on Instagram, and I want to add videos to TikTok. I should also at that point be shooting the first photo shoot for the book. By summer, I'll have 3 more books, more chapters. This is when I'll finish the course the textbook for the course of Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan. I want to add a 3rd variety of YouTube video at this point, but that might be a stretch goal. Even if I don't, though, I would want to be adding things to Patreon, because at that point I hopefully will have some more subs that would be valuable, that would find a Patreon valuable. I should be working on my 2nd shoot, working on the commentary for the first, planning the next 3 to 5 of them, brainstorming the necessary steps for the store, launching my non-original designs in the store, and then start sourcing resources for manufacturing, fulfillment, warehousing, etc. So by the fall, which brings you to basically the next winter solstice on December 21st of 2021 for me, but of course the winter solstice for whatever year it is that's coming up that you're watching this, that would be 3 more books. I would have to decide what I want to study now going forward, because at this point I've finished Hellenistic Astrology, and so I'll either find a new book to study or do an actual course, or I will catch up on however far behind I've fallen on Hellenistic Astrology, and hopefully by that time I'll be done. I will maintain consistency on all of the social medias like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Hopefully I'll be posting more to like Twitter, etc. at that time. Hopefully the bus will be complete by that time, which is really cool to think about. I'll launch the store. I don't plan on launching that right away in the year, even though it is part of my 21 goal. It's not going to be right away, of course. I will hopefully have scheduled the shoots for shoots 3 and 4, as well as written the commentary on 2, and the commentary on 1 should be done by then. To just kind of give you an idea of what it is that how you can divide out what your big goals are into smaller goals. The next step is to do something that's a little more physical, and so this is where I recommend that you check into Muchelle B's Simplify Your Life in 30 Days challenge, as well as just any of her resetting content for the end of the year. Some specific recommendations that I have are to declutter your life. Declutter whatever it is that you have that's not adding value to your life. If you have never decluttered before, also be aware that this is not just like a day project or even a week project. It might even be a month project. There's it's like decluttering is a roller coaster ride, and if you have aspirations to become a minimalist, be aware that this is not something that you're going to do before the new year. It's a goal all in itself for an entire year at least. But starting to declutter is always valuable for anyone. Also, don't forget to do a digital declutter, which for me is very valuable, and I assume that you'll probably find it valuable too. Don't forget your softwares, folders, devices, text messages, photos, Facebook messages, and your contacts. Like, you don't need to have contacts in your phone from people that are from high school that you don't talk to anymore. Also, don't forget to delete apps on your phone that you don't really use. You also need to find a place for everything. And this is something that I'm kind of struggling with because I don't want to buy storage because I'm building the storage into my bus, and so it kind of seems silly to buy things just to store them here. but we don't have a lot of storage in my house, so that's something that I'm struggling with, but I do definitely recommend that you do is have a house for everything. Identify what negative beliefs you have, and this is not something that you have to do in January or that you have to do at any particular time in your life, but I think that you should do it. I did not realize that I had a lot of them. Like, I mean, I was aware that I'm having problems with money, so I must have problems with money, right? And so I didn't recognize how deep that went though until one time Jeremy and I were walking through a home improvement store, and he got into a shower and he was like, I want this one. And it was super bougie. Like, it was like a $4,000 shower, and it was like a shower bath combo. And I immediately said, we can't afford that one, because it was like $4,000. But the funny part is that the reason that we couldn't have that shower wasn't because it was $4,000. It was because it had a bathtub. We can't put a bathtub in the bus. There's no room. So the reason that I can't have it is because it has a bathtub, not because it's $4,000. If I want to spend $4,000 on my bathtub, I can do that. But I don't have my bus then. And so I obviously know that having the bus is more valuable than having a $4,000 bathtub. So why did my mind immediately go to, you can't afford that? And the only reason is because I have some bullshit stories around money in my mind. So what you need to do is declutter all your negative beliefs, figure out what they are, and acknowledge that you can't unravel these in a day or in a week or in a month. And I haven't even been able to do it in a year. So figure out what those are and start learning how to flush them down the toilet. Another thing I think that is really fun to do in a new year is to define what your personal style is and then start actively looking for those pieces, whether or not you find them at thrift stores or traditionally. I personally love thrifting, but I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. But start kind of defining what your style is and really start living into whoever it is that you have said that you want to be, not only in the new year, but in the future. Another thing to do that's really great as a reset is to refill your stuff, right? So like refill your soap bottle in the bathrooms, refill your spices, refill your pantry, dry goods, refill all these things, refill your antifreeze, like go wherever it is that you go and have them top up all your fluids, just refill the things that need kind of maintaining over the year and just get them all started at square one. Schedule a day, which Muchelle B calls a life admin day, in order to take care of some of these items that are on your trigger list. Like, you are probably not going to get them all done, but she likes to do things that are like low effort, high impact. So like she put a chair together one day that was a lot more comfortable for her to work at. And for me, like some of the things that I have in there is like finishing my Titanic model that I have. Like I have a literal like a model of the Titanic and it's almost done. Like I have to put the smokestacks on and that's like it. Which, trivia, did you know that the 4th smokestack on the Titanic was just for looks? I also need to take care of some missing money. Like I have a check from 2011 that I just haven't cashed and now it's expired and it was sent to the state, which is really inconvenient to get. And I have like 3 of those to do. And so I have some missing money things I need to take care of. I have to proofread emails for my welcome series for whenever somebody puts in their email to Cherry Tree, they get information sent to them over time, and I need to proofread them. There are some mistakes in there that I know of, but it's a series of like 30 emails, so it needs some love. I also want to get a haircut, and we have all the seats from the bus sitting in a storage unit, so those need to be taken care of. And then finally, set aside a day to clean your house. Really clean it. And no, not a day. Set 2 days aside because one day is for cleaning normally, like tidying and just doing what you normally do to the point where you're like, I'm happy with this, right? I'm happy with how clean my house is. And then the next day, deep clean it, right? Like get in the nooks and crannies, clean out, like scrub with a toothbrush, like, do the baseboards, do the doors and the doorknobs and the trims and get the magic erasers out and clean the oven, and the fridge and the freezer and just do all those deep cleaning tasks that you don't normally do. Wash the curtains, flip the mattress, I don't know, whatever it is that you need to do that on a separate day from cleaning because you don't want to burn yourself out and not really get done. And then also be half done with all these projects, but too exhausted to complete them all. So that's what I recommend. So Comment below whatever it is that you plan on getting done before or during the new year, and remember that you're deciding. Like, you're not wishing and dreaming and hoping. You're actually deciding to get these things moving. And it's fine if they don't get completed, but be aware of what it is that you say you want to do, decide to do them, and then actually take the steps. Close down this year, especially if you're watching in 2020, which if you're watching this in the future, you know what kind of a shit show 2020 was. But close down whatever year you're watching this in with compassion for yourself, compassion with others, for others, especially if you've lost any relationships or have decided to walk away from any of them. Be aware that difficult things in your life are literally just to put you on the right path. And so be compassionate with yourself and others and recognize that you're finally moving towards the right path. If you think that somebody else would benefit from watching this or listening to this podcast, I would love if you would share it with them. I want nothing more than to help anyone get forward on the path that they need to be on. Leave a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure that you subscribe. We have new podcasts every Monday during the morning usually, unless I have a little bit of work to take care of, which has happened before, but I aim for Mondays. Leave some Instagram love or wherever it is that you're hanging out. Check and see if I'm there too. And most of all, get on with your life in 2021. And with that being said, later, Gator.